Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, our brother Bassam Zawadi, he posted a review of Dr. Yasir Qadhi's advanced Aqidah course. So today I just wanted to share some quotes from this review. It's about 28 pages long, and you can find it in the description. I'll post the link, so those who want to read through the entire thing, you're free to do so. However, I know a lot of us are busy. A lot of us are not going to take the time to read the whole thing. So I just wanted to record a video where I am sharing some highlighted portions of this PDF that I think are important for people to be aware of. Now, I specifically did one video about this course when it was being advertised. I could see that it was very dangerous. So now that somebody actually took the course and they posted a review for it, I think it's important that we follow up, because there's a lot of people who were critical of my criticism. And, well, I just think it's fair for us to actually go through this. The thing about Brother Bassam is that he actually has enough knowledge, mashallah, may Allah bless him and increase him, to actually take a course like this. He has a strong enough foundation to be able to critically think and see some of the biases, some of the things that are incorrect, some of the things that are dangerous about it. Whereas, unfortunately, I'm sure there were many other people who didn't have that foundation. They weren't as knowledgeable as our brother Bassam, and they were affected by this course and about what's being propagated. And that's the whole reason for any of these videos, where we are, being critical of people. Because some people, they just don't have a solid foundation. They don't have a strong enough foundation in the deen in terms of having studied to really know whether they should take a course like this, whether they should study from a teacher like this. So that's basically all we're doing, and Allah knows best, and Allah will judge all of us accordingly. So may Allah guide all of us and forgive us our shortcomings. Without further ado, I just want to jump right into it. One of the main things that I was saying was that when somebody goes and they study with kuffar, they study with non-Muslims, they study with Orientalists, this is something that is very dangerous. This is something that can warp somebody's view. This is not something that a Muslim should do, obviously. And we see the effects. We've seen the effects on Dr. Yasir Qadhi, and we were going to see how it affected him while he's teaching this course, because now what's happening is now he is spreading those views. When he went to Yale and he studied with Orientalists and he has gone down this path, now he is in the Muslim community trying to spread it amongst us. Okay, so just think about this for a second. Let's say that a Christian went to Medina University, and there are actually courses at Medina where they will teach you about Christianity. I took a comparative religion course in Kulliyat Da'wah. We were studying Da'wah, and part of that is studying some of the other world religions, Christianity being one of them. Now, I guarantee if a Christian went and studied with the Muslims, with the Muslim scholars in Medina at the University of Medina, they studied Christianity, and they really internalized it, and they really thought, wow, these Muslims are really academic, they're really intelligent, this work is brilliant. And then they went back to wherever they're from, and they started propagating those ideas, having clearly been influenced by the Muslims they studied with. I'm sure you would have Christians that would take note of that and that would find that problematic. Now, obviously, alhamdulillah, those who are Muslim, we know that Islam is the truth. So we have a clear way to differentiate truth from falsehood. This is Islam, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's preserved revelation. So of course we would be open to that happening, right? We would be open to a Christian going and studying with Muslims and then, letting that influence them. We would look at that as a positive thing. However, as Muslims, we also believe that the opposite is true, that if a Muslim went and he studied his deen with non-Muslims, with disbelievers, with people who dedicate their lives to teaching Islam, yet they don't believe in it, and therefore they definitely have problems within themselves in regards to how they understand it, and they also have intentions that we would see as very problematic and dangerous. So that's also true if somebody goes and studies with them and then they want to come to the Muslims and they want to start propagating this view that we would see is incorrect. It's not staying true to the tradition of Islam that was revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and passed down generation after generation. Then it's important that we actually speak up against it. So a review of Dr. Yasir Qadhi's advanced Aqidah course by Bassam Zawadi. On page 3, we see central problems, Dr. Qadhi's praise of Western academia and belittlement of traditional Islamic scholarship. A regrettable aspect of Dr. Qadhi's course is that it undoubtedly conveys the message that Western academics who study Islam are superior to traditional Muslim scholars in terms of academic competence, objectivity, credibility, and precision. This is continuously projected across subtly by Dr. Qadhi to the students taking the course, while at other times it is done quite explicitly. Below, I provide Dr. Qadhi's remarks to help the reader get an idea of what I am referring to. Regarding the assigned texts for the course from the Oxford Handbook of Islamic Theology, Dr. Qadhi says, I have studied at advanced institutions in the Islamic world. I have hundreds of books on theology written by Muslims and non-Muslims, and this type of writing that we are reading, it is simply non-existent in the Muslim world. Simply non-existent. I studied Mu'tazilism and Ash'arism and Najdism. I studied this in Medina with experts in the field, and mashallah, they have done a lot of good work, and I have most of their works. In fact, almost everything is important. It's my specialty. And then you read this type of stuff, and not only do they do a better job and more accurate, they also go far more detailed. And I hope if you read these articles with an open mind, you will see for yourself there is nothing equivalent. So here I'm going to skip a few more quotes where he praises Western academia. Bassam says, now let us contrast this praise for Western non-Muslim academics with how Dr. Qadhi thinks of institutions in the Islamic world along with their faculty and students. We need to be a little bit more critical, and of course that's the purpose of the Islamic seminary. That's why we are where we are. Otherwise, if you just wanted to be uncritical, you go to a tradition. Go to the Salafis, go to the Deobandis, go to the Shia, go to the Zaydis. You will all find a well thought out tradition, zero critical thinking. Accept what the teachers teach you. Even within Sunnism, go to Azhar verse, go to Medina verse, go to Darul Ulum. You have 3 separate trends. Each one of them is internally consistent. Each one of them is presenting to you its own holistic paradigm. And you are taught to absorb everything uncritically. That's fine. There's room for that in the Ummah, and frankly, that's the default. Most people are not going to be critical thinkers. But again, the Islamic Seminary of America is not one of those. The Islamic Seminary of America is challenging you to think, challenging you to contextualize yourself, challenging you to understand the tradition from within. So there's a footnote here. In Class 7, Dr. Qadhi expresses how unique TISA is by also stating, and I feel confident in stating that there is nothing like this in the entire world. I feel confident because I know most of the programs out there, and there is nothing being taught with this type of paradigm, where we are believers and we are coming from the tradition, and yet we are asking you to be critically challenging, even as we ask you to retain your iman, which is very difficult in the Western world. These generalized, condescending remarks are extremely unfortunate. Footnote 17, unfortunately there is more. In the first half hour of Class 5, where Dr. Qadhi discusses Shi'ism, Dr. Qadhi consistently either praises Western academia for its supposed objectivity or undermines the reliability of traditional Islamic scholarship when it comes to its stances. It is so much so to the point where it is difficult to simultaneously agree with Dr. Qadhi's remarks and have any real confidence in traditional scholarship anymore. Regrettably, this is the sentiment that is constantly presented to students who have taken this course with Dr. Qadhi, and it requires no elaboration on my part to highlight the long-term spiritual and ideological adverse effects of believing in the academic superiority of the Western academy when it comes to Islamic scholarship. Moreover, I sense a great deal of exaggeration in Dr. Qadhi's praise of the Oxford Handbook of Theology. I have personally read a few chapters from the book, and while I value the scholarship exhibited by some of the authors, I am taken aback at Dr. Qadhi's exaggerated praise of the book. Furthermore, while there is a basis to Dr. Qadhi's point that Islamic institutions around the world could do more to improve their curricula and enhance critical learning, to so casually stereotype against traditional Muslim scholars and students of knowledge as being uncritical and biased is to basically undermine their credibility and destroy Muslims' confidence in their very own religious authorities. And this is especially problematic if it is done while simultaneously propping up non-Muslim academics as authorities in the process. This is extremely irresponsible. Now, I don't want to add a whole lot of my own thoughts here. I kind of just want to read, but I want to highlight something. Imagine a non-Muslim did what Yasir Qadhi's doing, was very, very critical and condescending of Islamic scholarship and uplifted Western academia. If a non-Muslim were to do this, we would be offended. I'm sure some people would even say that it's racist. It's condescending. How dare they? And this is why people who are influenced by Orientalism and then go back to their communities and spread it amongst themselves are so powerful, because more people are going to trust them, more people are going to listen to them. And this is another reason why, Yasir Qadhi is constantly talking about his credentials. I mean, I've never heard anybody talk about their credentials more than him. And I think the reason that this is done is because he comes with a lot of stuff that is new, that's unprecedented, stuff that is controversial. And basically what he needs you to do is to trust him, is to trust his academic expertise. Therefore, it is very useful for him to talk about how many books he's read, how long he's studied, where he's studied, who he's studied with. Why? Because people will assume that he's trustworthy, even if he's coming with something brand new. The problem is, that might be true for Western academia, but in Islam, we have a different measuring stick. What we do is we go back. The people who preceded us had more knowledge than us, had a better understanding of the deen than us. So we always go back to the Quran, to the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the understanding of his companions radiyallahu anhum. To continue, Dr. Qadhi's revealing an important admission regarding his methodology. Dr. Qadhi said, the notion of being academic and neutral and liberal and open-minded, this is something that could only come out of our generation because, frankly, it's unheard of in the past to contextualize the way we are doing and to say, you know what, I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. It would be very difficult to do. Even somebody that I respect, like Ibn Taymiyyah, is only able to do it for some issues and not others. In the attributes, he's not sympathetic at all, and he's very black and white. It's either this way or else you have gone into deviancy. The flip side, our detractors accuse me of being a product of a Western mind, a Western education, and the response is, you're right. That's a fact. That's the way I'm thinking, and this agreeing to disagree is something you don't find generally speaking, in other parts of the world. But just because this paradigm is coming from Western academia, does that make it wrong? Is that invalid? And that's the deeper question that we need to then prove to our detractors. So that's the thing. Like Yasir Qadhi, he's telling you exactly where he's coming from. He says that he is a product of Western education. He says that's a fact. He admits it. But still, he has fans who will come in my comments and say, oh no, you're misrepresenting him. He's telling you with his own mouth. Bassam says there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, Dr. Qadhi is making it sound like it is only our generation, particularly the Western one, which has been able to observe and study differing views objectively and fairly. If this is not an indictment against the entire Islamic scholarly enterprise, I am not sure what is. There is a lamentable tone of conceit in such speech that should be shunned and avoided. Another thing, we talked about how Yasir Qadhi will constantly talk about his credentials. Another thing he will constantly say is, in my humble opinion. And that can be used as a tool to try and mask this tone of conceit, this lack of humility. Bassam continues, secondly, everybody has a threshold of tolerance, including Dr. Qadhi himself, who would most certainly not validate all opinions in groups who proclaim to be Muslims. Thus, just because others disagree with Dr. Qadhi on the boundaries of tolerance and make it more restrictive than him, that does not give him any right to imply that they are not academic, open-minded, and neutral. Muslim scholars have spilled so much ink on what constitutes valid and invalid disagreements. Will every one of them be correct? No. But to insinuate that they all utilized flawed methods until non-Muslims came along to educate Muslims about it is a bold and problematic suggestion. Thirdly, in answer to the question Dr. Qadhi posed at the end of the citation I presented above, let's refresh our memory. The question he's referring to is, but just because this paradigm is coming from Western academia, does that make it wrong? Is that invalid? Bassam says, I will say point blank that the answer is yes. Yes, the specific application of this Islamically foreign paradigm, which leads one to adopt significant conclusions related to theology in contradiction to traditionally held stances, is invalid and wrong. As a Muslim, one should know better than to accept the idea that Muslims had to wait around 1400 years for non-Muslims to educate them on how to approach the study of their own faith in order to determine which theological views are deemed legitimate or not. How Dr. Qadhi or anybody else cannot see the theological problem such an idea poses is truly perplexing. Now that is major, okay? The problem nowadays, subhanAllah, is we are so afraid to criticize or to be harsh about anything. I mean, this is so major what he just said. So I will leave it to all of you to try to internalize the importance of this paragraph here. So I'm going to skip to page 16. Dr. Qadhi's negligence in giving proper directions to his students. I was concerned about and displeased with some of the things I had observed during this course when it came to the influence Dr. Qadhi tried to exert on his students. Here are a few points I would like to share. It became clear to me that several students in the advanced Aqidah course were anything but advanced students. Dr. Qadhi, in one instance, even told his students that he doubted that all of them read Al-Aqidah At-Tahawiyah, a basic primer in Islamic theology. He also paused at times and asked his students questions to see if they understood the subject matter, and it became quite clear that much of the material was way above their heads. On occasion, Dr. Qadhi even hinted that some of his students do not even know Arabic. Therefore, I was disappointed to see how such a low bar was set for accepting students into such a course, while failing to ensure they were already firmly grounded in orthodox theology and could access the primary sources in the Arabic language. Now, I remember when this course was being advertised and it said that there was no prerequisite. Alhamdulillah, Bassam, he is qualified to take an advanced Aqidah course. He has a strong enough foundation. However, if he did not have a strong foundation, he wouldn't be able to point these things out that he's pointing out in this review. He would have just been influenced by Dr. Qadhi as his sheikh, as his teacher. And this would have shaped his view of things. This would have highly influenced the way that he understands Islam. He says, I found myself concerned with Dr. Qadhi's encouragement to the students, which includes those who are unqualified and cannot read Arabic, to become independent in being critical in their assessment of theological schools. This might have been okay if Dr. Qadhi provided the right necessary intellectual tools to his students, but for Dr. Qadhi to have given this advice to students after undermining the scholarly objectivity of traditional Muslim scholars and propping up the academic stature and credibility of non-Muslim academics sounded only like a recipe for disaster. Perhaps the most serious concern I had was when Dr. Qadhi in the first segment of Class 5 spent a considerable amount of time casting doubts on the reliability of traditional Islamic scholars and accused them of sanitizing, coloring, romanticizing, etc. history. Dr. Qadhi also told his students that as a result of his research, he has many findings which he would not share with them because it's not safe to do so. He also said that he draws red lines, which he personally does not cross in order to preserve his own orthodoxy. Footnote says, according to Dr. Qadhi, he basically takes off his academic and critical hat and brings in Islamic theology to make sense of problematic historical events. This would not have been a problem if Dr. Qadhi was not so selective and arbitrary when he decides when to behave like a traditional Muslim and Western-influenced skeptic. I found this all to be completely unacceptable. Dr. Qadhi literally exposed his students to intellectual doubts and even told them that he possessed dangerous findings that he would not share with them. He also carelessly undermined the only credible source that could possibly address these doubts, namely Orthodox Islamic scholarship itself. Then he thinks he can make things right by expressing how he, selectively and subjectively, draws orthodox red lines for himself, even when there is no convincing reason left for people to emulate him in his red line drawing. I found this to be utterly careless and irresponsible on Dr. Qadhi's part. In summary, I found this to be the course's biggest blight, and this reason alone suffices for me to strongly discourage others from registering for it if Dr. Qadhi intends to repeat what he did. So in conclusion, he lists some ways that Dr. Qadhi basically fell short in making this a successful course. He says Dr. Qadhi's dereliction by neglecting to cultivate in his students a stronger sense of pride and confidence in their own Islamic scholarly tradition. In fact, Dr. Qadhi has done the exact opposite by casting doubts on the general credibility of traditional Islamic scholarship. There was also a lack of sufficient reverence shown towards prominent scholars in our tradition, which only served to diminish their deserved status. Dr. Qadhi's failure to intellectually equip the students sufficiently to the point whereby they are capable of safeguarding their orthodox beliefs from intellectual attacks. He would encourage his students to embrace a particular critical methodology and then expose them to arguments which he at times does not provide them with the resources and intellectual arsenal required to overcome. At a certain point, he would capriciously stop being critical and tell his students that he arbitrarily draws a red line for himself in order not to cross the bounds of orthodoxy. Yet if one were to actually listen to him and become critical in the manner he prods him to be, he would technically have no reason to agree with Dr. Qadhi's non-evidentially backed and ad hoc conclusions on several matters. In light of this, we hope Dr. Qadhi and others could reflect on and benefit from what has been mentioned in this article, and that it motivates them to be warier of the dangers of negligently navigating between traditional and Western academic Islamic scholarship. May Allah guide all of us. May Allah forgive us. May Allah protect us from doubts. May Allah bless us with the common sense to learn our tradition from scholars of our tradition, to learn about Islam from those who believe in Islam. May Allah guide us to understand that He has preserved this deen, and we should go back to understand it. We should go back to the Quran, to the authentic Sunnah, to the understanding of the companions. May Allah protect us from learning our deen from the wrong people who will lead us astray. Allah knows best. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.